Steve here. You think you know how money works in this country, but the truth is, the entire system, it was designed in total secret, hatched by a handful of the world's most powerful men on a remote, private island. Now, this isn't just some old story. This is the real story of how the Federal Reserve was created and how they got the power to literally create money from thin air.
If you trade the markets day in and day out, you have to ask yourself this question. And let me tell you, the answer isn't in Washington, D.C. It starts more than 100 years ago with a few Wall Street titans who realized the existing system just wasn't working for them. So they decided to build a new one. You see, before 1913, guys like J.P. Morgan had to act as the economy's fire department, using their own personal fortunes to put out financial fires. But the panic of 1907, that was a different beast. That was an inferno that almost took them all down. They knew they needed a better way, a system that could tap into the unlimited credit of the U.S. government. They needed a lender of last resort, a fire hose that would never, ever run dry. But of course, there was a huge problem. The American public, they hated the very idea of a central bank. To them, it just smelled of monopoly power and old European royalty. So if these guys were going to pull this off, the entire plan had to be built from the ground up, completely in the shadows.
So, picture this. It's late November 1910. A single, private train car, all its blinds drawn tight, slips out of a New Jersey station in the dead of night. Inside, a group of men who, between them, controlled about a quarter of the entire world's wealth. Their destination and their very identities were a state secret.
Where were they going? Jekyll Island, Georgia, an incredibly exclusive, totally isolated club for the super rich. For 10 straight days, they were completely cut off from the rest of the world. No phones, no newspapers, no interruptions. They were there for one reason and one reason only, to draw up the blueprint for America's new financial system.
So who exactly were these so-called hunters? Well, you had Senator Nelson Aldrich, a political heavyweight with deep ties to the Rockefellers. You had Paul Warburg, a brilliant European banking expert from the powerful Warburg dynasty. And then you had Frank Vanderlip, the president of National City Bank, what we know today as Citibank. This wasn't just a meeting. This was the absolute nexus of political and financial power all in one room.
Their cover story? A duck hunt. Yeah, a duck hunt. They even brought shotguns with them to make it look convincing. Frank Vanderlip later wrote about the insane level of secrecy. They were ordered to use only their first names, Nelson, Paul, Frank, so that even the servants at the club wouldn't figure out who they were. Let's be clear, they weren't hunting ducks. They were designing a machine.
Every secret plot has an architect, right? And in this story, the real brains behind the operation wasn't an American politician. He was a European banker with a very specific and very grand vision.
That man was Paul Warburg. Now, he argued that America's biggest problem was its inelastic money supply. Think of it like a plumbing system where the pipes can't get any wider or narrower. When the economy boomed and needed more credit, the pipes were too narrow and everything got clogged up. Warburg's solution was simple, a central valve, a lender of last resort that could control the flow of money, opening the spigot whenever they needed it.
But Warburg was a Wall Street guy, through and through. If the public knew he was the one who wrote the plan, it would have been dead on arrival. They needed a front man, a politician who could sell it to the American people. And that man was Senator Aldrich. His job was to take this banker's plan and wrap it in the American flag.
And their strategy, you have to admit, was a brilliant piece of misdirection. They called it the Aldrich Plan. They proposed this system of regional reserve associations. It sounded decentralized. It sounded all-American. But it was just a facade. Behind the curtain, the real power, the control over the money itself, was centralized right where they always wanted it, with the banks.
So the blueprint was drawn, but getting it from a secret meeting on a private island to the law of the land, well, that was going to require a whole new level of political chess.
At first, the Aldrich Plan completely failed. It was just too obviously connected to Wall Street, and the public rejected it. But the puppet masters just waited. After the 1912 election, the new Democratic administration took the very same plan, slapped a new name on it, the Federal Reserve Act, and added a paper-thin layer of government oversight. The engine was exactly the same, they just changed the logo on the hood.
And the timing of it all, it was perfect. On December 23, 1913, just 2 days before Christmas, with most of Congress already back home with their families for the holidays, the bill was rammed through to a vote. President Woodrow Wilson signed it into law almost immediately. It was all done in the dark, with almost no debate.
And just like that, they'd won. The puppet masters from Jekyll Island now had exactly what they wanted all along, a central mechanism, backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government that could create money and control the spigot for the entire American economy.
So you might be asking, why does a secret meeting from over a century ago matter to me, right now? Because we are all living in the world that those men built. The game hasn't changed one bit.
Today is March 10th, 2026. As you're sitting there watching the charts, placing your trades, I want you to remember this. Every single tick up, every tick down, it's all happening inside the very architecture that was designed in that smoky clubhouse all those years ago.
When you hear the Fed is raising or lowering interest rates, that's a Jekyll Island tool. When you hear them talk about quantitative easing, which, let's be honest, is just a fancy term for printing digital money to buy up government debt, that is a Jekyll Island tool. These aren't some new complex ideas. They are the original levers of control.
They sold this system to the American people on a promise. They said it would create stability. They said it would end financial panics for good. But just look at the record. The Great Depression in '29, the dot-com bust, the crash of 2008. The system doesn't stop the panics. It just manages the fallout. And, more importantly, it decides who gets the bailout.
So the final question is this. Did the Federal Reserve actually end financial panics? Or did it just institutionalize the bailouts for the powerful? When you understand where it came from, the answer is pretty clear. The Fed was never created to protect you. It was created to protect the banks. Never, ever forget who holds the strings. This is Steve. Follow the money.